Hello again. It's Mary, and welcome back to me talking about another book. So, today we have Phantom of the Opera, and I sure hope you have heard of Phantom of the Opera before, because if you haven't, I'm deeply impressed. Phantom of the Opera is probably mostly known for its musical version on Broadway, and it also has a movie version that was on Netflix for a while. I don't know if it still is or not. But it was actually originally a book. It was published in 1909. It was originally written in French, and it takes place in France, of course. So it was written by Gaston Leroux. Yeah, really interesting novel. I actually really enjoyed it because I don't know if any of y'all remember, but maybe a month ago from about the time I'm gonna post this, there was a live stream on YouTube where they live streamed the 25th anniversary of the Family Opera musical on YouTube. What few people know probably is that they also live streamed the second Phantom of the Opera, which is honestly an insult to the book and the original musical, but it has some good songs, so I'm not going to complain too much. Phantom of the Opera is a pretty big franchise, but when I finally watched the musical version for the first time, I realized how much I was missing from the movie. Because who would have thought that the movie really didn't do the musical much justice, especially with the Phantom, because the Phantom is supposed to be this amazing singer. And then they have whatever character played the Phantom in the movie version, which was not a professional singer, when quite frankly they probably just should have hired someone off of Broadway, but that's just my tea. After I watched the musical, I kind of decided I want to read the original book because if so much was lost from the musical to the movie, how much was lost from the book to the musical? And the answer to that is just about everything. I love the musical. I think it's beautiful. I love the music, and I kind of like the plot, even though it's not the best written. But I think the most interesting thing for me looking back and forth between the book and the musical is what they obviously had to take out because of the change in medium. Because there's only so much you can do in a musical that you can do a lot more in a book. Like, everyone knows that from book to movie, there's always a lot taken out, but when you go to a musical performance on stage, there's even more you have to take out, honestly. Phantom of the Opera is about a mysterious figure doing mysterious things and always kind of lingering around, and there are just so many characters and so much going on. I can understand why they can't do that on the musical. That being said, the musical doesn't do all the justice it could to the original piece of literature. Because Phantom of the Opera is a really interesting book. It's pretty good. It's probably one of the better books I've read over the past month or so. After all the, inner family relationships and people loving children a bit too much. Phantom of the Opera was kind of a breath of fresh air in the weird way. If you've seen the musical, you know a lot of the plot line. There's this new singer in town, Christine, and then her love interest, Raoul. What the musical makes happen is that they are very obviously in a relationship from the start, while in the book, Christine acts like she doesn't know Raoul, and that's for her own both their safeties because the Phantom is a very jealous man. I guess the most fascinating thing to me about this book is the difference between it and the musical. I'm probably just going to go through the plot and then kind of explain how things differed in the weirder ways. Because it is basically the same plot as the musical, just a few details now are a bit scrambled. So at the start, Christine just had her debut performance. She sang beautifully, she's so talented. And Raoul is almost more the main character in the book. He's the one we hear from and kind of see through the eyes of the most. So his brother recently invested in the opera house or something like that. So he's around there a lot. He's gawking over Christine because they were childhood lovers. and he still loves her dearly. Basically, what happens, he's trying so hard to be with her and be near her, and she's trying to push him away because, oh, she doesn't want to make the Phantom upset. And she does genuinely believe that the Phantom is an angel at the time, because something you know, if you've seen the musical to some extent, is that she thinks that the Phantom is the angel of music sent to her by her dead father. In the musical, it came off as less important. But in the book, you see that she genuinely believes that this is an angel. This is another earthly being who she can only hear. But Raoul mentions, oh yeah, I heard you talk to somebody, and I heard him say this and that and the other. And she's like, wait, you can hear him? Because she thought he was just a thing in her head. And that's kind of when the Phantom's illusion of being an angel for her starts to tear at the seams a bit. But it doesn't help when he takes her to his underground house and kind of shows himself to be fully a man. That happens a bit after Raoul really confesses his feelings for her, and she's like, oh, the Phantom won't let me marry. Which is really controlling, buddy. But there's another part where they went to the ocean where they both grew up and knew each other. They spent some time together, and apparently the Phantom is there too to some extent, and she goes to the graveyard late at night to hear him play some song on her father's old violin, because her father was a famous violinist. Then it goes on where, she sees the Phantom that he's just a really deformed man, but he's also brilliant and he will kill, because the book even starts out with someone recently dying because I guess they talked bad about him or did something he didn't like, because the Phantom is kind of a whiny little B word. His illusion is shattered of being an unearthly being, and he just wants Christine to love him as a lover, and he wants to be loved. And he wants Raoul out of the picture, and he's threatening Christine with Raoul and all this mess. What ends up happening is that Christine says, well, we can't get married, but let's have a secret engagement. So that's how they live a month before Raoul has to leave for some sort of business thing, because he's a businessman. But they live a month in the secret engagement while trying to keep away from the prying eyes of the Phantom in the opera house, and they make a plot to run away together. And their plan is to let Christine have this one last performance for the Phantom, and then they'll run away and go to America or something. The Phantom doesn't like this. The Phantom figures it out, and in the middle of her performance, he takes her off the stage. Raoul, of course freaks out, because that's his lover. So he meets up with this man who's known as the Persian, and the Persian is kind of this mysterious guy who walks around the opera house and does his own little thing. But he reveals to Raoul that he knows the Phantom's history and the Phantom's backstory. The Phantom's name is Eric, by the way. Might still call him the Phantom, because, I don't know, it suits the aesthetic. But the Persian reveals that he knows the Phantom's backstory, he knows how to get to the Phantom. So they go together to go try to rescue Christine. And they get trapped in this weird room that's like a bunch of mirrors and simulates heat, and they have like hallucinations. It's really creepy. And then there's a metal tree to hang themselves with. Oh, it's so weird. And once they get out of that room, they also realize that, oh yeah, if Christine denies the Phantom, he's gonna blow up the opera house with however many people's up there too, with themselves, because the Phantom can't live without her. So Christine makes a plea for Raoul and the Persian's life. The Phantom lets them go. At the very end of the book, you kind of learn what happened, because Christine and Raoul ran off later, and the Phantom tells Christine's guardian, because both her parents are dead at this point, that, was it her guardian? It was the Persian, wasn't it? The Phantom talks to somebody and says that he felt loved by Christine, and like her kissing him and looking at him without his mask on made him feel like enough. So he let her go because she looked alive and not dead. It's tragic, it's heartfelt, but it's really different from the musical, and I think that's really interesting. I don't think the Persian was as big of a character in the musical. I don't remember him. What kind of took his place was this woman who in the book was a kind of ticket keeper. She took people to their seats. In the movie, she was a ballet instructor. She was a bit more of a manager and authority figure. Her name was Madame Gurley. She has a daughter named Meg who also knows about the Phantom. They both kind of know about the Phantom. The ballerinas gossip about the Phantom a lot, and they all are terrified of him. But Gurley is in his good graces. The Persian got written out with her in the musical. What also varies a lot is that I think the Phantom is a lot more sympathetic in the musical. Because in the book, he is written to be this terrifying figure. Christine is terrified of him. She thinks that he's this sort of unearthly being, and when she finds out he's just a man, she's still scared because he's a very hideous man. And also, of course, it's a bit easier to like him in the musical because he's not wearing a death mask. And I had to figure out what exactly they meant by death mask. I'm pretty sure it means it's like an impression of a dead person's face that he wears over his own. And apparently he looks so sickly and hideous. He doesn't really have a nose. To go out in public, he wears a fake nose, and that makes him look somewhat passable, but still pretty bad. Of course, they couldn't do that in the musical because they need a microphone somewhere. But his mask is a death mask, and he actually is seen in public places in the book. Like, he's seen at a ball with his death mask, and yeah, he's portrayed as a lot more uh, handsome in the musical, mostly because they have to get, like, you can't just try to find someone who looks like him for the musical. That's perfectly. But with that being said, he's a lot more romantic and tender in the musical, I think, because in the book he's so brute and he's so rash and he's so aggressive. He's a terrifying person, and Christine very well knows he'll murder anyone who gets in his way, and he doesn't see anything wrong with killing, and that's terrifying. You also see a lot more of his terrifying side in the torture room, is what they call it. It's the room at the very end with all the mirrors that's made to look like a savannah. And this room is kind of terrifying, just the concept of it. Just, ooh. And it's actually really impressive for him, because when they said torture room, I was expecting whips and chains. It's not. It's a bunch of mirrors. It's made to heat up like a desert and has a bunch of animal noises in the night to make whoever's inside terrified and make it so they just off themselves, because that's the easiest way to get rid of them while they slowly go a bit mad. And that's actually a pretty cool concept, and I can see why they couldn't do it in the musical, because that seems like it'd be hard to pull off, but it was really horrific, and I think that was super interesting because I think the musical loses how much of a horror story this also is, along with kind of a romance. Wiki calls it romance mystery horror, but it's so horrific because the Phantom is such a terrifying character, but with that, he's also so human and passionate. He's really complex, and that comes through a lot better in the book. But I think the musical didn't do him justice with how terrifying he's supposed to be. And as I said, the second musical is really an insult to the book, because Christine, in the second musical, leaves Raoul for the Phantom. It's so stupid. And she ends up on cheating Raoul with the Phantom like 10 years prior. And that's just an insult to the original piece, because she was terrified of the Phantom. The Phantom is a terrifying character. And, like, I'm sure I'm repeating this, but it's just something that really doesn't come across in the musical that I wouldn't have guessed because honestly, the Phantom's just kind of a hunk in the musical. Sure, he's got a little bit on his face, that's fine. He's a handsome hunk when he got his mask on. He's got big hands, you know? That being said, Christine is also a much better character too in the book, obviously, because she's just more defined. Christine in the musical always came off as very much of an airhead to me, and I think in the book she has a bit more strength and depth to her. Not much more, but a bit more. She's still mostly a pretty face. Who especially got downgraded in the musical, though, was Raoul. Because Raoul in the musical is kind of this tough guy who loves his fiance. So we stand that, okay? But in the book, he's a very timid, soft, lovely man. And I kind of wish we saw that in the musical because he's much more headstrong in the musical. And I think it was a bit more interesting to see him be so timid and have to overcome his fears for the girl he loved so much. And I think that's a much more compelling arc to look at, kinda. So basically, I stand Book Raoul a lot. He's a good boy. But also, the book does a bit better than the musical. The musical, as I keep on saying, it seems to be a lot more focused on romance and kind of this love triangle idea. But in the book, he has a lot more depth in how the world made him into a monster, and there's a line near the end of the book saying, if he had a normal face and wasn't cursed with his ugliness, could he have just been a lot more renowned? Because he's not just an amazing musician, he's an amazing architect, he's intelligent, he knows a lot of things, he can do a lot of things, he's a very talented individual. He's renowned for his architecture, and apparently how the Persian knew him was because some court hired him to make secret passages in their castle, so he did, and then they were going to kill him, but then the Persian ran off with him. The Phantom is such a compelling character and is so interesting, and the musical really doesn't do it justice. It's almost impressive how little it does him justice. If you like the musical, I'd say definitely read the book because I think once you read the book and look at the musical, I think you can definitely get more out of the musical and more understanding out of the musical. It was a really good book. It had its sweet, romantic, tender moments, especially with the secret engagement, which is a lot different than the musical, where it's like, oh, they aren't telling people because they don't want the Phantom to know that they're going to get married, but in the book it's because they're trying to kind of pretend they're getting married, and that's more the reason for the secret engagement. I guess in the book it's a lot more pining too. And there's a line about keep your hand at the level of your eye. They don't explain it well or clearly in the musical, in my memory, but in the book you realize it's because if he goes to strangle you, because that's what he's good at. He's good at strangling people. If you keep your hand at the level of your eye, it's easier to, like, prevent a rope from coming around your neck and staying there. So it's a lot of these little things that make the book a bit more, like, feeding into the musical to make it a bit easier to see the depth of. But I would highly recommend this book. It was a lot of fun. It was very interesting. I very much enjoyed it. So, with that, hope you enjoyed. As I stated, I kind of love the Phantom of the Opera. I stand. Hope you enjoyed my little rant for today. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.